You're welcome back to our second conversation. Nigeria's Senate has stood resolute in its defense of a spending plan worth billions of naira to purchase official vehicles for lawmakers. Details of the Senate spending on the purchase of these vehicles, which they claim to be for their official use, emerged some weeks back. The upper chamber of the National Assembly at the Senate currently grapples with its incessantly complaining staff, but has gone on a spree to buy vehicles or to plan to buy vehicles amid a national outcry on the cost of governance and the country's current economic struggles. Only yesterday, a chairman of the Senate Services Committee addressed the press, where he tried to explain to Nigerians why the Senate and by extension National Assembly must spend that amount of money worth billions of naira for 360 sport utility vehicles, in particular Toyota Land Cruiser Prado. Well, we have Achike Chude, a public affairs analyst, and Dr. Omoshola Deji, political scientist, joining us to discuss this development right here on Politics HQ. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
All right, Omoshola, thank you so much. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the chairman of the Senate Services Committee, Sunday Karim, APC Kogi West, but he tried to, or he tried to justify the purchase of those sports utility vehicles. The cars, he's citing the need for members of the National Assembly to reach their constituents, some of whom are remote locations. The cars have also previously been described by the Senate President as their working tools. Listening to Senator Karim, can you understand, Deji, the necessity of getting legislative vehicles to enable these legislators do their work?
Well, getting legislative vehicles is important to the discharge of the duties of the senator. And if you look at the argument of the Senate was on the fact that, okay, other aspect of other agencies and other political office holders, the kind of vehicles that they use, according to the Senate, are also SUVs, and some of them have up to 3, 4, 5. So based on that argument, the Senate should not be left out. Now, in fairness to the Senate, another argument brought forward by the Senate is the aspect of durability, that these SUVs, after 4 years, because it is a recurring decimal by the National Assembly to always buy utility vehicles every 4 years. And the argument of the Senate is that these utility vehicles, after 4 years, that they depreciate in value. Now, having stated the position of the Senate, let us now look at how tenable this argument is based on the reality of the Nigerian state and what is at hand socioeconomically. Now, if you compare what other the judiciary, the ministers, and other members of the executive, what they are using, the Senate says, okay, we need to use this as well. But where is the saying that you lead by example? Because the purpose of the legislature is to checkmate, for checks and balances. So when you fail to lead by example, you are saying, oh, because my colleagues is doing this, then I must do it. Now, I've never seen Kofi Bartels smoke, but let's assume Kofi Bartels is smoking. Does that mean that I too must smoke? Or if I'm smoking, does that mean Kofi Bartels must smoke? So based on that argument, the position of the Senate is untenable in terms of comparison. Why is the Senate not comparing itself with the legislature of other countries across the world, whereby they are cutting costs in difficult times? Then in terms of durability, you now need to question this Senate that how do you use a brand new vehicle within 4 years that it will be so bad that, okay, it is no longer usable again. This is Nigeria. We have population, we have a population that some of them are using the same vehicle for the past 10 years. So, and the vehicle, they didn't even buy it, newly. It is perhaps Tokumbo, or maybe they are even the third or fourth user. So living in such a country, what argument can you say that the vehicle that was bought 4 years ago cannot be used now? Now, looking at the leadership structure, the Senate indicts itself and it indicts the executive as well, because right now, the federal government, comprising of the legislature and the executive, now let's exclude the judiciary, the legislature and the executive is an assemblage of people that have ruled in different states before. And one of the arguments of this Senate is that Nigerian roads are bad, so they need SUVs to be able to access their constituencies. Now, the president is a former governor of Lagos State. You have indicted him. If you are a Lagos senator and you subscribe to that argument and receive that SUV, the vice president is a former governor. He spent 8 years in Yobe State. So he himself, you have indicted him. The current Senate president is a former governor, 8 years, 2 terms in Akwa Ibom State. So if you look at the federal government today, it's an assemblage of men that have ruled in different states of the.
All right, Deji, Omoshola, thank you very much. I just want to chip in there. You've basically answered almost all my questions for today, but we'll pull through. Bola Tinubu is president of Nigeria. He has never been president before now, has never held a federal appointment before now. It could be argued that the roads in Lagos State, majority of them, are motorable. Whereas if you want to look at other states outside Lagos, which have a large expanse of their land, rural, this is where you have the issue, especially federal roads, interstate roads, and then from one local government area to the other. So I'll give you an example, Cross River State, or I'll give you an example, Abia State. Moving from River State to Abia State, that road has been bad for years. Moving from River State to Akwa Ibom State, that road has been bad from years. You move from Akwa Ibom State to Cross River State, the road is bad. Now, these are federal roads, and some of these people you're calling have never had an opportunity as federal ministers or the president to be in charge of how much is allocated to which road, which some would argue the president of Nigeria calls the shots.
Very good question, Kofi. Now, first, as regards Lagos State, it is of public knowledge that the current president is the most relevant political godfather, arguably in the history of the Nigerian state. Even the former president, Obasanjo, Yaradua of blessed memory, Jonathan, and immediate past, Buhari, doesn't come close to him in terms of godfatherism. So, since 1999, it is he that selects whoever becomes governor of Lagos State. And it is safe to argue that he has been ruling by proxy. And when you receive the glory, when something good happens in Lagos State, if something bad is happening, be ready to accept the blame because you have placed yourself in that light. Now, like 2 weeks ago, I was at Mushin. Don't take my word for it. Send your cameras out, verify. I was at Mushin, and a trailer was about to enter a street because of a giant pothole from Surulere to Mushin. The trailer was about capsizing, and there was traffic. While I was about to pass there, I was literally begging God that.
Okay, did you get your point? So you're saying that not all the roads in Lagos are good, but I'll move on from that.
Not all the roads
you mentioned Godswill Akpabio. I don't know if you've been to Akwa Ibom State before, but Akwa Ibom State is the state, I think, in Nigeria with the best road network. Akpabio really did a yeoman's job. Nobody can fault him. Of even roads that you don't have a lot of people plying, people don't live there. He put flyovers, overhead bridges and all that. Akwa Ibom is fantastic when it comes to road. Should he, because some president or some governor elsewhere didn't fix his roads, not have his due as Senate president? That's number one. Number two, how many of the 360 legislators have held office where they had were in charge of making decisions as to which road to fix or not? How many? It could be argued that the majority of them have never had that opportunity.
Well, I'd like to attend to that based on two arguments. Number one, if you look at most states, it is the sellable roads, the roads that sell the states to investors, foreign investors, political allies, when they visit, that are tagged. If you go through the interlands, for example, in Lagos State, I just gave you an example, right? If investors are coming, they hardly pass through that route. I'd gone there to, purchase one or two things at that particular market with a friend. That's how I was able to know. And now, if we now look at it, let's move away from that road argument to the economic situation in the country itself. Now, these are Nigerian leaders. For you to be at the Senate level, definitely you are a Nigerian leader of some sort.
Okay, Deji, I really wanted to respond to why other senators should suffer, bad roads. But we want to bring in Achike Chude at this point. As a public affairs analyst. Chude, thank you so much for your time. The chairman of the Senate committee, and Deji, apologies, I'll come back to you shortly. The chairman of the Senate Committee on Services, or Committee on Senate Services, Sunday Karim, he gave his explanation of the perceived high cost. As we speak, you don't really know exactly how much will be spent on each vehicle, but we know the total cost, so we can do the math, about 130 to 160 million per vehicle. But he's given his explanation on the perceived high cost of each vehicle. He cited a markup margin of 25% per vehicle, which he says is standard practice in civil service when making supplies, that you have to add that margin for the supplier. He also cites some government taxes, some 5%, and then VAT of 7.5%. That's why each vehicle may cost high. What's your take on these, Achike?
That what you're saying is that referring to him, that if the cost of a vehicle is 100 million, then they mark it up by 25%, 125 million. What's the purpose? When you're buying these vehicles in very large numbers, so economies of scale normally should even drive the cost down. So how can anybody advance this kind of argument? It would make sense if he says, well, because they are going to give us these vehicles on credit, and we might have to pay maybe in the next six years or the next 2 years, and that is the reason why, because they will be tying their monies down and will not be able to reinvest the monies because the government is holding on to the money, so they want to make as much money as possible, so they don't lose, so that they can at least make some marginal profit. That's the only thing. Otherwise, every other thing in that argument is absolute total corruption. And again, I don't know how anybody in this country can justify that. There is no justification for a country that is paying about 93, 94, 96% servicing the national budget with about 95, 96% of its budget. And for a country that says, look, we need to increase the pump price of fuel, we need to remove subsidy, because a few people are benefiting from the subsidy. You remove the subsidy, the vast majority of Nigerians who are already suffering go into deeper poverty. And then you use part of the monies recovered to buy jeeps of 130 to 150 million naira for each senator and members of the House of Representatives. How does that make any sense under any circumstance? It is morally unjustifiable. It is legitimized stealing of the country's resources. I mean, we have a situation in Senegal where they had a bicameral legislature, and then they realized that the economy could not carry two chambers of their National Assembly, and there was a general elitist consensus, political consensus, to remove one, chamber of the National Assembly. That is what you call responsible and patriotic and committed political leadership. What had just happened with all of these vehicles shows irresponsible political leadership. Insensitive, leadership. And so there's no way it can be justified under the sun. The country cannot afford it. Because that's the question you ask. Can Nigeria afford this number of cars going to these people? Can we have cheaper, brands of vehicles?
Okay, talking about cheaper brand of vehicles, Achike, one thing Sunday Karimi said, he said that the choice of the Land Cruiser Prado SUV, the model, is based on durability and cost of maintenance, and that he says that, the previous Senate or Senates have owing about 16 billion naira due to this. So this financial burden of maintenance and all that.
How much is a RAV4? How much is a RAV4? For instance, a same Toyota model.
But they're looking at cost of maintenance as well.
Yeah,
and durability.
So the same thing. What is the cost of maintenance of a RAV4 Toyota Jeep and a Land Cruiser or a Prado? It's far higher because these are state-of-the-art vehicles. A Prado or Handliner are not as exotic and not as luxurious. So what happened to those vehicles? What happened to off-road vehicles? What happened to pickups? A pickup, the art pickup sells, would sell, Toyota model would sell for around 60 million. Somebody told me recently, today there's about 60 million naira now. So what happened to those? If you are looking at for rugged vehicles, all-terrain, all-weather vehicles, you should be talking about, a Hilux, Toyota Hilux pickup, not a luxury state-of-the-art luxurious vehicle. So who is pulling who in this country? You are talking about politicians that are irresponsible now, people who don't care, for about the state of poverty in the country. They can only do it in a country like Nigeria, where the citizens are very docile and passive. Otherwise, they would have pursued them out of government.
Achike, are you therefore saying, Achike, are you therefore saying that it is okay as a global standard and practice to purchase vehicles for legislators, parliamentarians? So
no, we have not even gotten there.
National Assembly, because you said why don't they look at maybe pickups, trucks, like the Hilux and all that?
So if they have to, but can the country afford it? A lot of these people, before they contested for elections, were already rich. They had vehicles. That's why we keep on talking about cost of governance. We need to remove all the attractions, all the financial rewards that come with politicians being in power in this country, the obscene access to wealth that they are having. So when you are able to reduce that and make it much less attractive, then they will not be jostling. They will not, see politics as a do or die affair. It's because of things like this. They have access to vehicles, they have access to accommodation, they have access to stupendous amounts of money for very little job that they are contributing, that they are doing in the country. So these are some of the issues. But believe me, we shouldn't even concentrate so much on the National Assembly, because the executive are doing exactly the same thing, if not worse. You have how many governments in the whole country? Each of these governments will buy vehicles for their commissioners, they will buy vehicles for their directors and all that. These are vehicles that will range in the thousands. So it's not only at the National Assembly that you are seeing this profligacy of public funds, but in virtually all the state governments in this country, they are also purchasing cars. And that's why they keep quiet when people are talking about the National Assembly.
Yes, let me bring back Deji Omoshola. Deji, looking at the scrutiny and criticism that the National Assembly has faced over its procurement practices, in your opinion, what steps can be taken to enhance transparency, accountability, and efficiency in the procurement process for government officials, even not just vehicles, but other things?
Well, one of the process that accountability can be maintained is, first, you can only buy a foreign vehicle if there is no vehicle production company in Nigeria. And we have Innocent. Innocent is just at our backyard. So why not use that money at a time when Nigeria has forex crisis, to use it to strengthen the capacity of Innocent? So if we begin to be accountable to ourselves, like we cherish what we have, definitely then the system will be better off. Then, you see, one of the ways to bring about accountability is making the bidding process transparent in the sense that the Senate needs vehicles. The bidding process should be public. If they make it public, you will see that many interested minds will be willing to provide that vehicle at a lesser cost. And even if it's going to be a foreign vehicle, they will import it into the country. Observe that in Nigeria, if you do something for 10 naira, when government wants to do that same thing, it's going to cost like maybe 60 naira. Then you ask yourself, why? As a government, the cost of goods and services should be cheaper because you have great personality and accessibility to negotiate and bid than me, who happen to be a private individual. But that is not happening. Another thing is there should be a maintenance segment at the Senate, in the sense that, you see, we shouldn't be buying 360 vehicles at a go. No, it is that maintenance section at the Senate that will determine that, okay, this vehicle is no longer usable. Then they will now procure another one to replace it, because all the vehicles cannot lose durability at the same time. Why?
All right.
What do I mean?
Yeah, we don't have time, Deji. Because of time, we have to put the plugs there.
Just a moment.
Yes, yes.
A senator that is representing Abuja, Nasarawa, Kogi, the senator representing Abuja is still within Abuja. So are you saying that in 4 years, the new SUV, brand new, is no longer usable? Says who?
Okay.
You see,
okay.
It is the culture of
Deji, thank you. So what you're advocating for is to have a maintenance department and have a carpool, just like we had in the military days, where if you're a civil servant, you have the government number, the green number, and after work closes as a civil servant, you can't take that car out. You have to keep it at home. And when you retire, they give that car to another person. Well, let's see how it goes. Unfortunately, gentlemen, we're out of time, but we'll follow this story in Off History. We hope to have both of you back at some point in time to discuss further on this and other issues. Achike Chude, a public affairs analyst, and Dr. Omoshola Deji, political scientist. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
All right, we'll see how this story pans out. Like we said, there was a time in Nigeria where we had cars being handed over from civil servant to civil servant during the military days, and you couldn't use a car beyond the close of work. We'll get back to those days, well, time will tell. That's the size of our package for now, right here on Politics HQ. We return tomorrow with more. Stay with us right here on News Central. My name is Kofi Bartels. Good night.